Hi everyone, it's Jen again, and we are now into the second month of OtomeJam. Yay! I've got some extra work that I've been doing besides the game jam, so it's kind of good that I reevaluated my schedule into getting, just part of the game done before the jam, so I think I'm pretty much on schedule for that. As usual, I skipped ahead from the scripting stuff to the art stuff because that was the stuff that was like easier for me to get my to get into. So instead of although I did do this, I did start Brown Roots, so I can cross that off my list. This is always very satisfying. I didn't get all my framework put in for the forest, but I am going to do that next week along with starting to write the forest scripts. I want to keep doing bond routes 1 through 4, so right now I have imported and revised all of the common unit bond routes 1 through 4, and then I have to do all the elite units 1 through 4, but I did do all the elite units conversation 1, which are a little bit longer than the conversations in the first game because I am kind of trying to condense more relationship building and storytelling in a shorter time frame as far as like what activities outside of like building relationship is occurring in the game. One of the things I really did enjoy doing though is working on these effects. So I had kind of in the back of my mind that I wanted to make a elemental kind of like special effect for when the elite units use their skill triggers, and these would be just very generic kind of effects that would be the same for all fire units, would have the same fire effect. All earth units would have the same earth effect, all wind units would have the same wind effect, etc. So I did go ahead and do that, and it was like pretty fun change of pace because most of the animation, as I've kind of gone over in my videos before, is done with the vector animator animeeffects, and so it's really just creating like a puppet. I'm using layers in Photoshop and then just kind of manipulating those layers to kind of make very subtle and small movements, as opposed to doing what my actual animation training. So I went to school for animation, for 2D animation. I brought up this little like kind of like pencil test just to kind of show what my characters would kind of look like if I was actually animating them with drawings instead of doing my usual vector manipulations with just like static images. So at one point I had thought, well, maybe I'll do like actual like character individually drawn frames for like one of my projects, but it's just so it's so labor intensive that I didn't end up going through with this idea. But this was kind of like some roughs that I started to sketch, and it was really fun to animate. But again, it's just these frames are kind of like playing choppy because I'm using an app to share my iPad screen. But you get an idea that there's a little bit more of like these kind of like imperfections from like frame to frame. It looks a little choppier because I didn't do all the in-betweens to smooth it out. But there's something about it that feels a little bit more like soft and free to me whenever I see like the frame by frame hand-drawn animation as opposed to the vector animation, which is just like a little bit too smooth. But one of the techniques that's used in doing these types of, especially like character animation, is like knowing sort of like what you want the overall action or gesture to be, and then you kind of create what would be like the extreme poses, and then you go back and then you create like the in-between pictures to make those drawings more smooth, and that just gives you more control over the actions that you're trying to create. So you can kind of see even with my drawings that like I had kind of like the drawings are a little bit more rendered out where my my keyframes. So here at like frame 1, you can see I had kind of rendered out the character a little bit more, and then I had decided that I wanted him to kind of like tip his hat. So then I had drawn frame 4, and then I started doing these kind of like in between, and you can see they're really rough. They're more rough because I was just trying to test to see if I even liked the way that it moved from like frame 1 made 2 in-betweens to frame 4. And once I decide that, oh, this motion is okay, then I would go back and render those drawings a little bit more tightly, and then add probably more keyframes from like the from the in-betweens to smooth those out more. So that's kind of how like the animation process usually goes for like things like I guess set motions or set gestures, where you have kind of like a beginning and end goal, and the forms and the shapes kind of behave in a predictable way. When I was creating the animation for the special effects that I wanted to have happen, I did go ahead and make the roughs in flippaclip because I find it to be a very just easy program to just kind of sketch out ideas. I don't really like the tools for doing like final rendering though, so I export the PNGs and then bring them into Procreate to finish. So when I was like kind of like creating something that's a little bit more organic and doesn't really have, I guess, a set form, I do more what's called frame by frame animation, where instead of like creating keyframes and then smoothing it out, I just kind of like let it flow, where, you know, I have this kind of in mind to like make this fire kind of go in this explosive little loop. So I just kind of like drew these little like, you know, this kind of amorphous form frame by frame. And so for doing this type of animation especially, I wanted to be able to do some rough tests of it to make sure that it was going to look okay before I went in and actually rendered, did like the final color and stuff. So that's why I decided to like do this in flippaclip first. Once I have my animation sort of like pencil, this would be like my pencil test, I guess. Once I have my pencil test done, I would go to kind of this tab over here in the corner to export, to make the movie, and then instead of like making it an MP4 like a movie file, I would just like do a PNG sequence where I would save the files to my iPad. And then once the files are saved to my iPad, those little keyframes, I would go into Procreate, and then I would just go to this add action here, insert file, and then I would go to my folder of frames, and then I would just like import them one by one, and then on a new layer. And then I would go through and just, you can kind of see here if I play the video, time lapse. I import all those frames. I went through and I redrew the frames with the brush in Procreate because it just feels a little smoother. I like the line quality better. It's probably not like super necessary for this flame, but like some of the other element effects, I realized I was going to be redrawing all of it anyways, so that I was a little bit looser with it. Just refining the little curves to be a little bit smoother, and then I went in and filled them in with, first with orange, and then with yellow on the inside. And Procreate does have an animation, kind of like to export GIFs, I think. But I didn't particularly like using the animation function in Procreate, so then I export this as a PSD in layers. So here we can see I have each flame grouped by the line art and the 2 color layers. And we can see I did that for the water effect as well. Exported it, the individual frames, as layers. So I took the files into Photoshop, and then there I flattened all the layers and organized them. Brought them back into my favorite animation program. And instead of doing kind of like transforms like how I normally would, we just turned off and on the visibility of each frame. And then I exported these as a PNG sequence at 12 frames a second. So not super smooth, but wanted it to be like fairly small. Named them all effects. So we have our all our effect PNGs here in our image folder. And then we open the project here. Under the effects here. Set the animations to set the images to display for 0.2 seconds each in a repeating cycle. Go to our battle sprites, and then here under this new effect screen, created screens for each effect. Then we go into our skill triggers, and then sort of like the skill trigger of let's see, Stone Shield. Now we have the screen effect displaying here, along with the character portrait, and then we hide it at the end. So some of the other things that I added, I can't remember if I talked about this in the last video. I don't think so. I feel like I added this week. These weeks are kind of starting to blur together, to be honest. Report to the end of the quest line. I did also add in that. Let's see. I can't remember with these castle functions if I talked about it or not. Well, basically I just added more ways for the player to increase their loyalty with units outside of combat. So now you have kind of like a daily task cycle. Right now I haven't done any of these things, so if I relax, then you can get a note from one of your servants, and given whoever wrote the note will increase your loyalty with them. I made this kind of consult option so that your assistant can tell you the things that you should be doing in case you've forgotten. I've added this groom option. So this is a random chance to increase your loyalty with any of the elite units. And depending on what he says, so in this case he said perfect, so that means that this increased your loyalty with Michaelis. think like lovely means that you've increased your loyalty with Dieta, etc. Now, I can only do those once a day. And right now on this file, I just got back from doing the dungeon mission. I think I've already talked to the queen and turned in my quest for that, so she doesn't want to talk to me right now. I have all these bond levels that I started gaining while I was in the dungeon, so I can talk to these characters. And you get to see them in their non-combat uniforms. And answering these questions gives you a chance to increase your loyalty with them as well. I think it will be pretty easy to increase your loyalty in this game as opposed to the first game without having to grind as much. But since you're not having to gain gold either, I think that it makes more sense not to have to do so many random encounters. When we go back to the chat room, you can see that we've spoken to Mikhail, so we can't speak to him again today. If I try to do random encounters, because I had already come back from being in the dungeon this day, it tells me that I need to go sleep first. Which I can do. And then that resets all of these daily variables, so we can do those things again. I can check to see if I've got an email. And this time we got a letter from Michaelis, where he apologized for trying to choke us in the beginning. I now have the option to go into the dungeon for a random encounter, where Michaelis will rejoin our party. And so this is another opportunity to increase your loyalty with this unit in particular. Once you agree to join in this little like mini quest, then you have to just get 3 wins, and then you're done. Let me go ahead and get out of this file. And let's go to this file with the boss, so we can see how the new effects look inside the game.
Let's roll. You can't escape. Skill trigger. Open your eyes. Double bonus.
It was kind of like a little thing that it took me hours to create, but it makes me happy. It feels like it's just adding a little bit of that extra polish.
This.
And I hope to keep going back and like adding little things to this game to kind of like polish those things. So whether it be like doing like kind of adding like the daily tasks.
This is nothing.
Where we're kind of adding like little quality of life features for the player, or whether it's like adding in like little tiny aesthetic changes, like I want to go back in and add things to make the information display in these battles a little bit more clear and concise, so I'm going to plan on doing that as well.
Skill trigger.
Hold steady.
And I think this is sort of the stuff that I was able to just be able to work on because I pushed back my schedule. So one of the comments that I got in one of my other YouTube videos was like, I think misunderstanding that since I wasn't, I was taking out goals for OtomeJam, that I was going to be taking things out of the game overall. But actually pushing back my schedule is giving me the opportunity to add more things, more features, more like kind of all those daily things that you do in the castle to increase loyalty outside of combat. You know, those little extra letters and stuff is all stuff I hadn't planned on writing or programming, but because I have more breathing room, it was like a fun thing for me to add in that I thought would make the experience for the player a little bit like less tedious, a little more entertaining way of like breaking up the ways that you can increase loyalty with your units. Along with like these little combat animations. I hadn't really planned on doing that during this jam, so yeah, pushing back my schedule is giving me a chance to kind of go in and flesh things out a little bit more than I had planned, to refine things that I hadn't really thought of, that have just kind of been coming to mind as I've been working on this project. As like I kind of just see something that I'm like, oh, I could improve that, and I'm like, I actually have the time to go in and improve that. And I hope to bring overall out of these improvements to the original core game as well. So that's probably going to be what I'm going to focus on after I finish this game at the end of the summer. When I go back to the original Arcane Dice Wars, is going to be just like taking everything that I learned from doing this side game and all the stuff that I improved upon, I'm going to add to the original core game. So that's where I'm at right now. For is this week 5 now? I think that let's see. So we have this whole week. This is gone. Let's see where we're at here, because I'm gonna sound like my grandparents now. But time goes by so quickly. It really does. So upcoming week, okay, so we've got 4 weeks left. And basically what I have to do in those 4 weeks now as a priority is writing and implementing the second chapter of The Forest, which I already have all the framework for, so I'm not super worried about that as long as I go ahead and like actually hunker down on it. And then I have to do the other 3 bond levels for each one of the elite characters. So very manageable. Looking forward to it. And hopefully I'll get it done early so that I can give myself ample time to actually go through and debug and implement the sound changes that Carrie has been doing for me. She's been improving the quality of the voice recordings that I have, as well as I think she's going to be adding some of her own sound effects that are going to be better than the ones that I'm using. So I also want to put in here that I need to go back and add voice channel. Yeah, I need to add voice to dialogue. That's another one of those things that I have trouble finding the time and quiet space to actually implement, because it requires a lot of like kind of like reading over what I've written and listening to the voice files and remembering the inflections and seeing if I can find places where it's appropriate, and then testing it. Well, that's all I have for this week. It's been a really fun week. I've really enjoyed kind of going back to my animation roots. It's been a bit of a scorcher. That's the one downside, is that all the heat that is given off by my computer and by my tablet, I've been feeling a little bit sticky, even with central air. So it's always a challenge to stay cool when we've got like all of our computers in one office. So yeah, that is the one downside. So I if I could find like a way to comfortably script without using my desktop computer, it's just I hate typing on like the little keyboards on my laptop. But if I could bring my laptop into the basement where it's cooler, that would make more sense. So I don't know, maybe I will just like unplug my keyboard and plug it into my laptop and clearer table in my basement where it's a little bit cooler, and maybe that will give me like the quiet space and comfort to really knuckle down on that script. All right. Thanks for listening and staying in tune with what I'm working on. I hope you're having a good week and enjoying your... Is it officially summer yet? I'll have to look that up. I hope you're enjoying the warm weather and keep enjoying the process. Take care. Bye.